Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Avery was left alone in a remote lakeside cabin, no one expected war. But when a power-hungry HOA president showed up claiming the land, she triggered a fierce legal and personal battle. What started as trespassing became a full-blown fight for truth, justice, and the right to be left alone. I had just dropped off Avery at the cabin on Friday afternoon. Left her with a week's worth of food, a full tank of propane, and a satellite hotspot strong enough to stream law lectures from the middle of the damn woods. She was 25, sharp as a razor and more independent than most people twice her age. I wasn't worried about her in the slightest. This place had been in our family since my grandfather built it after the war. The land was private, clean, and documented 6 ways to Sunday. No HOA, no neighbors for half a mile, no nonsense. Or so I thought. Saturday morning, I was up early, checking trail cameras on the far ridge, when my phone buzzed. A text from Avery. Just 4 words. Some lady showed up, no context, no emojis. That was her way. I called immediately. She answered calmly, voice low and controlled. Uncle Shane, there's a woman here with 2 guys in uniform shirts that say Silver Pines Patrol. She says this is HOA land now and that I need to vacate. I felt my blood pressure spike like I'd just found a cougar in my truck bed. Did they touch anything? Come inside. No. She stopped at the footpath and started barking orders. I told her to leave, said it's private land and I'm the legal owner. She's still here. The 2 guys are standing behind her with clipboards. One of them is filming me. I muttered something I wouldn't repeat in church and told her to stay on the porch, lock the doors if they moved closer, and keep recording. Then I jumped into my pickup and started the hour-long drive back to the cabin, cursing every twist in the road for slowing me down. While I drove, she kept me updated via text. Apparently, the woman introduced herself as Karen Whitmore, president of the Silver Pine Shores HOA. She claimed the lake and its perimeter were now under watershed authority and HOA partnership supervision. According to her, this entitled the HOA to remove unauthorized occupants from any unregistered lakefront structure. Avery told her, word for word, "Ma'am, I am the registered property owner. I have the deed, tax records, and a notarized will that says I own this cabin. You are not entitled to anything." To which Karen allegedly replied, "We'll see what the sheriff says." And boy, did she mean it. 40 minutes later, as I was halfway up the gravel road, Avery sent another message. Cops just pulled up. I floored it. By the time I reached the gate, 2 county cruisers were parked at the entrance to our road, lights off but doors open. A third vehicle, HOA labeled Tahoe, was angled theatrically near the fire pit like they were filming a reality show called Suburban Justice. I parked beside them and stepped out holding a leather folder stuffed with every legal document I had. Avery stood calmly on the porch, arms crossed, while Karen gestured wildly in front of 2 young officers who looked like they were regretting every career choice they'd made since high school. As I approached, one of the officers, Rodriguez, if I read the badge right, turned to me. "Sir, are you related to the young woman on the porch?" "I'm her uncle, and I'm the co-trustee of this property," I replied, handing him the folder. "That cabin belongs to my niece, Avery Marlowe. She inherited it legally 2 years ago. Everything you need is in there." Karen interrupted immediately. "This is a misunderstanding. We received reports of suspicious activity. It's an abandoned property, and per our emergency HOA jurisdiction, we have authority." "Ma'am," the officer cut her off. "We'll take a look at the documents first." 10 minutes passed while the officers examined the deed, plat maps, and notarized transfer of ownership. The second officer, Dobbs, muttered something to his partner, and they both walked over to Karen. Rodriguez cleared his throat. "Ma'am, this property is not part of Silver Pines Shores. It was excluded from the original plat and is listed as private, individually owned land. The occupant here is the legal owner." Karen blinked rapidly. That can't be right. I was told, our new management plan clearly shows. Rodriguez held up a hand. "Ma'am, you made a false report of trespassing on someone's private property. That's a serious accusation." Karen's voice dropped an octave. "Well, maybe there was a clerical error. It's not like I broke in. I was just checking." She trailed off as the officers exchanged looks. One of them issued her a formal verbal warning for misuse of emergency services. No citation, not yet. But it hit her pride like a sucker punch. Avery watched from the porch with the same expression she used when reading court transcripts, calm, cold, and noting every word. Karen eventually backed toward her car with the grace of a drunk raccoon, mumbling something about double-checking the parcel maps. She and her 2 patrol officers left without another word. The cops apologized, genuinely, and told us to call if anything else happened. I thanked them, shook their hands, and walked up to Avery, who hadn't moved. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded. "I will be when we add a second lock." We both looked out over the lake. The sun had started to dip behind the tree line. The surface of the water was smooth and quiet. Too quiet, if you ask me. Because something told me Karen Whitmore wasn't finished. The next morning, I was up before dawn. Couldn't sleep. Something about the way Karen backed off too easily the night before didn't sit right with me. People like her don't retreat. They regroup. So while Avery was still asleep, I walked the perimeter of the property, flashlight in hand, checking locks, trail cams, the boat dock, and the path leading to the gravel access road. Everything seemed intact, at least for now. Around 7, Avery came out onto the porch holding 2 mugs of coffee, one of which she handed me without a word. That's how you know she's family. She knows what matters. We sat in silence, sipping and listening to the birds. Just as I started thinking maybe we overreacted, I noticed something strange near the main gate, a flash of something white nailed to the split-rail fence. I stood up and walked over. My stomach twisted. It was a freshly printed HOA sign, laminated, bolted in, bold red lettering, Private Community Access Only, Silver Pines Shores HOA, Trespassing is a crime. Below it, someone had zip-tied another, Watershed Zone, under surveillance. Subject to enforcement. They'd posted them overnight, probably while we slept. I pulled both signs down and brought them back to the porch. Avery stared at them, then calmly set her coffee aside. "Now they're trying to reframe the narrative," she said. "Make it look like we're the ones intruding on them." I nodded grimly. "Let's take a ride." We drove into the little town 20 miles south, picked up a set of heavy-duty motion-triggered cameras, a few more private property no HOA access signs, and a new steel chain for the front gate. I also called a local locksmith buddy of mine to install a coated gate pad. When we got back, we found something worse. A group of about 15 people, lawn chairs, coolers, and towels in hand, were gathering at the lakeside edge of our property, right where our dock extended into the water. It looked like a damn HOA-sponsored beach day. They had set up a folding table with snacks, were inflating paddleboards, and, this made my blood boil, someone had even started a small fire pit in the sand. On our land. And there she was, in a wide-brimmed hat and white polo shirt embroidered with SPS HOA, waving like it was some 4th of July barbecue. Karen. I parked the truck hard, hopped out, and marched straight toward the gathering. Karen saw me coming and clapped her hands. "Oh, good. You're just in time. We've opened the lakefront for the community for the weekend. Isn't that wonderful?" "No, Karen," I said coldly. "You're trespassing. Every one of you." She patted my arm like I was a confused elderly relative. "Shane, no need to get so worked up. We're simply using community shoreline for recreational purposes. It's public now." "New cooperative zone agreement." I stared at her like she'd grown antlers. "There's no such thing. That shoreline is private property. We've got the legal surveys. You're staging a community event on land you don't own, and I'm giving you exactly 5 minutes to get everyone out." She smiled that smug HOA smile. "Then by all means, call the sheriff." Again. Avery was already on the porch, phone to her ear. The sheriff's deputy showed up 25 minutes later, just as 2 kids started swimming off our dock. We had camera footage already uploading to the cloud. I handed it over. The deputy, a guy I'd dealt with before named Langley, was decent. Professional. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, "I'm going to need you to take down these signs and get your group off this land. I've reviewed the property lines. You are clearly not authorized to be here." Karen wasn't smiling anymore. She tried arguing that the HOA had a claim pending with the county, and that the lakefront had historically been used by residents. Langley just raised an eyebrow and pointed toward her SUV. "Go home, ma'am." As they packed up and left, a few people looked genuinely confused, embarrassed even. I recognized one guy, lived on the far end of the lake, and he mouthed sorry as he folded up his beach chair. Karen climbed into her Tahoe without a word. We spent the rest of the day reinstalling cameras, placing signs along the trees, and mounting new trail sensors near the dock and gate. Avery dug out our old camping drone and flew it over the entire edge of the property, documenting every new sign, every footprint in the sand, and the fire pit ring. The worst part? When we checked the front gate again before dark, the chain was gone. Sliced clean through. It had only been up for 10 hours. The next morning, I didn't need an alarm clock. A banging headache and the faint noise of an engine revving in the distance did the trick. I rolled out of bed, grabbed my boots, and by the time I stepped onto the porch, Avery was already there, coffee in hand, eyes fixed on the gravel road. A white SUV was idling just past the broken gate. Another HOA branded vehicle. Different model, same obnoxious decal. It didn't come closer, just sat there like it was surveilling us. "We need to escalate," Avery said without looking at me. "I already called Liam," I told her. "He'll be here by noon." Liam Devlin was a licensed cadastral surveyor and the closest thing to a human GPS I've ever met. Former Army Corps engineer, now semi-retired and living off-grid just 2 towns over. He owed me a favor after I helped him track down some illegal deer blinds on state land last winter. I told him I needed a precise confirmation of our lot boundaries and proof of any encroachments. He said he'd bring the works. When he arrived, his truck looked like something out of a FEMA response unit. Tripods, lidar equipment, drones, binders of regional maps, and one very large steel thermos. We walked the perimeter together while Avery manned the porch with binoculars. Liam got to work, setting markers at each corner, cross-referencing county records, and checking real-time satellite data. His expression got more and more grim with each pass. By 3 in the afternoon, we were seated around the picnic table on the back porch while Liam laid out the findings on a laminated topographical map. "Well," he said, tapping the edge of our property with his pen, "your grandfather's original plat still holds. Nothing's changed. Your lot runs right up to the lake. Not 1 inch of this land belongs to that HOA." He flipped open a second folder, inside a printout of something unofficial looking. "This," he continued, "is a proposed revision map that was quietly submitted to the county planning board 3 months ago. Shows a newly extended community access corridor that loops behind the lake and just happens to include your cabin, your shoreline, and 2 other private lots." I blinked. "Where'd you get that?" He shrugged. "Someone in the assessor's office owed me a fishing weekend. These weren't made public. It never passed a vote. But it looks like someone's been trying to pretend it did." The map had Karen's HOA's name stamped on the bottom. "Silver Pines Shores Boundary Integration Draft Proposal." On the side, scribbled in ballpoint, "Prepare for community review. Include cabin zone," and a half-erased line, "Talk to JR before pushing." Avery stared at it, silent. Liam continued, "This isn't legal. It's not filed. It's not real. But it sure as hell explains why that lunatic is acting like she owns your shoreline." We scanned the documents. I recognized some names in the marginalia. A couple of them were HOA board members. At least one lived 2 doors down from Karen on the HOA side. It was clear now. Karen was trying to quietly annex parts of non-HOA land by submitting fake maps and assuming nobody would fight back. "Is this enough to take to the county?" I asked. "Hell yes," Liam said. "You've got a forged submission, altered boundary lines, and trespassing based on a lie. If you file a complaint, they'll have to investigate. Especially if you back it with property surveillance and title documentation." Avery stood up and disappeared into the cabin for 5 minutes. She came back with her law school tablet, typing like her fingers were on fire. "I'm drafting a cease and desist. We'll notarize it. I'll also prepare an initial complaint to the county commission and a preliminary claim for harassment and misrepresentation of jurisdiction." She looked at me. "And we're going to send it certified." I almost smiled. That girl wasn't just calm under pressure. She was pressure. We spent the next several hours uploading footage, scanning documents, and organizing everything into evidence folders. By sunset, we had over 20 gigabytes of material, video, photos, land records, scans of the phony HOA map, and GPS-logged survey files. We were nearly finished when Avery received a new email. Subject line, "Silver Pines Notice of New District Designation." It was from a Silver Pines HOA address. Attached was a PDF titled "Welcome to the Community." Inside, a fabricated letter welcoming Avery to the HOA with a statement that a $40 to $200 membership assessment was now due. Enclosed was a form to set up automatic monthly payments. Avery's eyes didn't blink as she read. "They're doubling down," she said. I nodded. "And we're done being polite." 2 days later, we mailed the cease and desist letter with a return receipt and emailed copies to every address we could find tied to Silver Pines Shore HOA. Avery also filed a formal complaint with the county zoning office and attached all the documentation Liam helped us collect. We didn't sit on it, we hit back. But we should have known that poking a rabid possum doesn't make it reconsider its life choices. It just makes it bite harder. That Friday, when I got back from town with supplies, the cabin looked off. Not wrecked, not vandalized, just off. The air smelled like fuel, and there were tire marks in the grass by the fire pit that hadn't been there the day before. I parked, stepped out, and instantly saw it. The trail camera mounted in the pine nearest the dock was gone. Ripped clean from the bracket. Avery came outside with her laptop. "The feed's dead. That one stopped transmitting at 2:27 a.m. We checked the footage from the others. The cameras by the front gate and porch were intact. The recording showed 2 figures approaching the lake on foot, one carrying a bolt cutter. At 2:17 a.m., they walked out of frame. The lake camera went black 10 minutes later. We couldn't see their faces, but we saw what mattered. The same SUV from before parked just beyond the tree line. The license plate matched one of the HOA patrol cars. Avery stared at the screen. They're getting bolder. That night, we reinforced everything. I mounted a new camera up high on the roof, camouflaged it, and added a trail mic. Avery changed the Wi-Fi passwords and started encrypting the video archive backups. I reinforced the main gate with a new steel post and chain, this time welding it shut instead of just looping it. Let's see them try that one again. But the next morning, something new happened, something worse. We were sitting at the table going over county complaint forms when I got a ping from the new camera. Motion detected near the eastern property line. I pulled up the feed. Karen. Not just Karen. Karen in a business suit, walking alongside 2 men in polos and clipboards, pointing at the land like she was on a damn real estate tour. One of the men took pictures. The other had what looked like a surveyor's wheel dragging it across our ground. "Is that guy measuring?" Avery asked, incredulous. I bolted for the truck. They were halfway to the dock when I pulled up. Karen turned around mid-sentence with that same vacant pageant smile she always wore when she was about to commit a felony with manners. "Shane, so glad you're here. We're conducting a compliance walkthrough on behalf of the HOA's Zoning Expansion Initiative. You're trespassing," I said flatly. One of the men, a weasel-faced guy with a clipboard, interjected, "Sir, we're acting under authority granted by the provisional boundary filing." "There is no provisional boundary," I snapped. "And even if there was, it wouldn't give you the right to enter private land uninvited." Karen tried to take over. "We're merely documenting landscape conditions." "You can't possibly object to a little harmless assessment, can you?" I pulled out my phone, hit record, and walked right up to her. "This is your final warning, Karen. Leave. Now. Before the sheriff comes and charges you with criminal trespass." Avery had already dialed. By the time the deputies arrived, same 2 as before, Rodriguez and Dobbs, Karen had somehow slipped into full victim mode. Claimed she misread the boundaries and that her companions were independent consultants. They weren't. One of them, the survey wheel guy, turned out to be her nephew, and the other worked at a landscaping company Karen's HOA contracted with. Not even licensed surveyors. The deputies took statements. This time they were done playing diplomat. Karen and her tag-alongs were issued official trespass notices signed on the spot. If they came back again, it would be grounds for arrest. Karen tried to protest, but it didn't help that Rodriguez recognized her nephew from a separate complaint the previous month, one involving harassment of a neighbor over lawn decorations. Real classy family. After they left, Avery looked at me and said, "I think it's time we stop reacting and start filing." That night, she put together a preliminary lawsuit draft with 3 claims: defamation for labeling her an intruder and distributing emails, suggesting she squatted on abandoned land, false report to law enforcement stemming from the first 911 call, civil harassment and attempted extortion citing the forged HOA invoice, trespassing incidents, and intimidation tactics. She contacted a law professor she interned with who specialized in property disputes. He agreed to review the filing and even offered to co-sign the suit pro bono, calling it the most arrogant abuse of HOA overreach I've seen since the mailbox color trials of Two Rivers County. We printed the paperwork that night. Karen had no idea what was coming. We filed the lawsuit on a Monday. Certified mail, digital copy, courier delivery. Avery made sure Karen Whitmore and the Silver Pines Shores HOA board received it 3 different ways before noon. It was simple, brutal, and direct. Just under 70 pages of sworn testimony, recorded evidence, maps, and legal filings that made it painfully clear we weren't bluffing. By Tuesday morning, the response wasn't subtle. Someone posted flyers on nearly every mailbox around the lake, even taped one to our own gate. Big, bold letters across the top, "Dangerous squatters on lakefront property." Below, a grainy photo of Avery from the porch camera, clearly ripped from the feed, someone hacked or accessed illegally. And a list of accusations. Trespassing, dangerous conduct, refusal to comply with community law, possible drug activity. That last one made me laugh out loud. Avery, who hadn't touched anything stronger than a caffeine tablet in law school finals week, stared at the flyer with ice in her eyes. They're going full slander now. We took down every flyer we could find. Neighbors watched from porches, some curious, a few embarrassed. One older couple even offered to help. They said, "We know this isn't right. This isn't what the HOA used to be." That afternoon, we installed a second set of trail cameras hidden along the wooded edge of the property. We weren't taking chances anymore. If someone so much as sneezed in our direction, we'd have it recorded in 4K. Wednesday, we got a letter, this time from the HOA's lawyer, a smug little note filled with legal buzzwords and passive-aggressive venom. It accused us of harassment, obstruction, and disruption of peaceful community engagement, then threatened to countersue unless we dropped our suit within 10 days. Avery snorted and highlighted half the paragraphs with red ink. "This is posturing," she said. "No case law, no citations, not even a real demand. They're bluffing." But what wasn't bluff? That night, someone came onto the property again. They didn't damage anything this time. They just walked. We caught them on the motion camera, a lone figure moving across the property line at 2:30 in the morning, shining a flashlight at our security signs. They didn't approach the house, just stood for a minute, then walked off. The feed auto-uploaded. I handed it to Deputy Rodriguez the next morning. He reviewed the footage and said, "This is starting to look like a campaign." "You're just now seeing that," I said. Rodriguez grimaced. "Look, off the record, you've got someone at the HOA who's really trying to make a statement. I'd suggest pushing the lawsuit forward fast. You've got momentum." And he was right. By Friday, the story hit the local news. I don't know who leaked it. Maybe Avery's professor, maybe one of the neighbors who'd had enough of Karen's reign. But the headline was brutal. "Lakefront War, HOA accused of harassment, forged maps, and targeting property owner." They used the exact language from our filing. Included excerpts, showed drone footage from Liam's survey, even ran an interview with a local historian who confirmed our property had predated Silver Pines Shores by over 60 years. That night, HOA's website went down. Their Facebook group locked itself. And suddenly, we started getting emails. Anonymous at first, then a few brave residents signing their names, thanking us, saying they'd been bullied for years, saying they wanted to testify. But Karen went silent. No signs, no patrol cars, no SUV parked in the shadows until Sunday. I was returning from a late hike when I spotted the truck, a moving truck backed up against the lake road, unloading folding chairs and canopy tents. And standing at the shoreline, clipboard in hand, was Karen. Again. Like nothing had happened. She was directing people, maybe 15 of them, as they assembled what looked like a stage. I parked the truck and walked straight over. She saw me and waved, overly cheerful. "Afternoon, Shane. Don't mind us. We're just setting up for a community waterfront safety demonstration." "On my land?" I asked, dead calm. "Oh, it's part of the community wellness grant," she said sweetly. "The same lakeside region that's under review for cooperative shoreline standards." I just stared at her. "You really think putting on a fake event will change what's coming?" She smiled wider. "Sometimes perception is more powerful than paperwork." I didn't reply, just took out my phone and began filming. The next call I made wasn't to the sheriff. It was to the county commission's ethics review office. They picked up on the second ring. The hearing with the county commission was scheduled for Thursday morning, but by Tuesday night, the town was already buzzing. The story had taken on a life of its own, now picked up by a regional news outlet that ran a segment titled HOA Tyranny. Lakefront family battles, HOA over fake property grab. There was drone footage of our cabin, overlays of the forged boundary map, and a retired zoning official explaining, in plain English, why Karen's annexation plan was legally worthless and possibly criminal. Avery printed out every article, tweet, and public record we could find and stacked them like ammo in a binder marked Exhibit A. She was relentless. The final version of our complaint had grown to 112 pages, with signatures from 3 other lakeside owners who'd come forward after the news broke. Turns out, we weren't the only ones Karen tried to target. The county scheduled the hearing at the Civic Hall, not the Commission building, because they expected a crowd. They weren't wrong. By the time we arrived, nearly 100 people were gathered, neighbors, reporters, even HOA members from other towns. Karen arrived in a pearl gray suit, sunglasses, and a fresh blowout, flanked by 2 men in suits that looked like they'd come straight from a law school internship program. She smiled like a politician, waved like royalty, and walked inside as if the public humiliation wasn't tightening around her neck like a noose. The hearing opened with Chairwoman Ortega, a no-nonsense 40-something Latina with a gavel in one hand and a fire in her eyes, reading the agenda aloud. Item number 4, Review of Complaint. 2487, Alleged Unauthorized HOA Expansion and Property Harassment. Avery stood and introduced herself formally, stating her name and role as the plaintiff. She didn't fumble a word. She laid out everything: timeline, evidence, trespasses, forged maps, phony letters, even the public flyer with her photo. She kept it professional, but every sentence landed like a nail in Karen's coffin. When it was Karen's turn, she launched into a bizarre speech about community cohesion, the dangers of unmanaged land, and restoring waterfront access to residents who had been excluded by generational privilege. She called our cabin an architectural relic without oversight and argued that it was in the public's best interest to formally incorporate the property into the HOA for safety and environmental compliance. Ortega's eyebrow rose so high I thought it might leave her forehead. The chairwoman leaned forward. Ms. Whitmore, are you claiming that your association has legal authority to unilaterally redraw county boundaries? Karen flinched. Well, not unilaterally. We submitted a proposal. Ortega slammed a folder down. We found your proposal. It was unsigned, not voted on by the HOA board, never approved by this commission, and includes forged annotations. Would you like to explain that? Karen's lawyer tried to interject, but Ortega cut him off. You speak when I say. Not before. The room fell silent. Ortega turned to one of the assistants and asked him to read the testimony from the zoning office's forensic analyst. The analyst confirmed the revised map submitted by Karen had been altered digitally, included photoshopped initials from a former zoning officer, and had metadata linking it directly to Karen's home computer. Karen's face drained of color. One of her lawyers leaned over and whispered something that looked suspiciously like plea deal. Then came the kicker. One of the other homeowners, a retired schoolteacher named Gloria Madsen, stood up from the audience, raised her hand, and asked to speak. Ortega nodded. Gloria walked forward and said clearly and loudly, Ms. Whitmore filed a fake complaint against my grandson for unpermitted gardening last year. We had to go to small claims court over a tomato bed. The crowd laughed. Karen's face twisted into something between fury and panic. 3 more people followed, stories of fines for non-existent violations, threats over lawn gnomes, passive-aggressive inspections. Karen, once untouchable, now stood there shrinking as the room slowly turned on her. By the end of the hearing, Ortega made the following statement for the record. Karen Whitmore was found to have submitted falsified documents to a county commission. Silver Pines Shores HOA had no authority over the lakefront properties in question. The county was launching a criminal referral to the district attorney for charges of document forgery, abuse of authority, and attempted property fraud. In one final twist of the knife, Ortega ordered that all HOA enforcement activities be suspended indefinitely pending a full audit. Karen's response: she tried to storm out, but reporters were waiting. Cameras, microphones, questions flying. She shoved one out of the way. Big mistake. The shove was caught on film. Assaulting a reporter, that was the last straw. That night, the district attorney's office announced it would be fast-tracking the investigation. Karen was officially under criminal review. Karen Whitmore was arrested the next morning. It was early, not even 7, when I got a call from Deputy Rodriguez. He kept it short and clean. "We executed a warrant this morning. She's in custody." I hung up and turned to Avery, who was already sipping coffee in front of the fireplace. "She's booked," I said. Her eyes didn't leave the flames, but she smiled for the first time in weeks. The report hit the news by 9. Karen Whitmore, president of Silver Pines Shores HOA, charged with forgery of public documents, filing false complaints, trespassing, attempted fraud, and obstruction of county process. There were clips of her being led out of her house in handcuffs, still in her silk robe and slippers, muttering to the officers as if she were correcting their grammar. Then the next wave hit. The warrant wasn't just for her arrest. The DA's office had been busy overnight. They obtained a search order for Karen's house and the HOA's private office space, one of those faux cottages near the gated entrance of Silver Pines Shores with a community welcome center sign out front. And what they found wasn't just damning. It was surgical. In Karen's home office, they seized a desktop PC containing multiple versions of the fake boundary map, each labeled with draft numbers. A series of emails between Karen and 2 HOA board members discussing how to push the Marlowe property into HOA coverage quietly. Templates of fraudulent letters prepared in the names of other homeowners, including 3 people who had since signed affidavits saying they never authorized anything. In the HOA office, they found a locked file drawer full of unsigned community violation notices with property addresses not under HOA control. A binder labeled Target Zones Lakeside Reintegration Plan, which included our lot, 2 others, and a Phase 2 section with 6 more private parcels circled in red. A printed memo titled Post-Incorporation Fee Projections, listing estimated fines and fees for newly integrated parcels. The DA called it a fraudulent property annexation scheme under color of HOA authority. That same day, criminal charges were filed against Karen, and subpoenas went out to 2 other board members for failing to report known abuses. The fallout was immediate. By noon, the Silver Pines Shores HOA held an emergency meeting via Zoom. Not that it mattered. Most of the board either resigned or flat out disappeared. The HOA's law firm dropped them. Residents started organizing a recall vote. Not that they needed to. Ortega had already frozen the HOA's enforcement authority by court order. Then came the kicker. The county filed a motion for civil forfeiture, seeking to dissolve the HOA's charter pending investigation and liquidate its assets to pay for damages. And that included compensation to victims. 2 days later, Avery received a certified letter from the interim county attorney confirming that she was entitled to seek damages. Our case had triggered the chain of events, and now, under the law, the HOA was liable for property damage, cut locks, trespassing, etc., emotional distress caused by harassment, false reports and defamation, legal expenses, and retaliatory action costs related to security and monitoring. Avery didn't hesitate. She filed a formal claim for $35,000, attaching every document, camera recording, and survey map. The county fast-tracked it. Karen, now out on bail and under house arrest with an ankle monitor, had the gall to try one last stunt. Her lawyer issued a public statement saying she deeply regretted any confusion caused by administrative errors and was merely trying to ensure the community was safe and compliant. But no one was buying that anymore. We heard from a neighbor, the older couple who had helped take down the flyers, that a group of residents held a candlelight meeting near the dock one night, not in protest, in relief. The last week of August, a truck from the county rolled up to the old HOA Welcome Center. They loaded signs, files, banners, even that smug bronze Silver Pines Shores Code enforcement plaque, and drove them away. It was over. The HOA was being dismantled. Karen was facing prison. Our property, secure, undisputed, and finally quiet. It was mid-September when the last remnants of the storm finally faded. The county had officially dissolved the Silver Pines Shores HOA, pending full legal liquidation. What little was left of their funds, some $40,000 in fines collected over the years, was frozen for distribution to the claimants. Avery's case, naturally, sat at the top of the stack. We got the check by courier, $35,000 plus a handwritten note from the interim county attorney. Thank you for standing up when others were too tired to. Avery framed the note and hung it on the cabin wall next to my grandfather's old fly rod. By then, the place looked different, not because we changed it, but because it felt changed, stronger, ours in a way it had never been before. We installed electronic gates at the main access road, reinforced the dock with new solar lights, and posted polished metal signs that read, "Private land, not HOA. Trespassers will be prosecuted." But the best part was Avery's sign, a small wooden plaque she carved herself and nailed to the trailhead. Avery Marlowe's land, always private, never HOA. People started showing up with handshakes and thanks. The older couple from down the lake came by with a bottle of local wine. A teacher from the next town dropped off a folder of old HOA fines that had disappeared from her record thanks to the audit. A few other lakeside owners banded together to form a new voluntary shoreline alliance just to make sure nothing like this ever happened again. And then came the letter that tied it all up like a bow. Avery had submitted an article to a prominent legal journal over the summer, an in-depth breakdown of our case, the legal mechanics of property boundaries versus HOA overreach, and the importance of recorded plat sovereignty in rural counties. The journal accepted it. It was published in October under the title Private Property Public Abuse, the Marlowe Case and the Rise of Unauthorized HOA Expansion. It wasn't just a write-up. It became required reading in one of her law seminars. Her professor even invited her to speak at a regional legal ethics conference. The girl who once just wanted to read by the lake now stood behind a podium, explaining how HOA power grabs crumble when met with a well-organized, law-bound response. I sat in the front row for that speech, arms crossed, boots still dusty from the trail, watching her explain every step like a veteran attorney, calm, relentless, surgical. She ended with the line, "It's not enough to own the land. You have to defend it. And if someone like Karen shows up with fake maps and a smirk, don't argue, show them the deed, call the county, and bring receipts." The crowd laughed. They applauded. She stepped down like she hadn't just fired a cannon in a conference hall. We drove back to the cabin that night in silence, the windows down, the lake reflecting moonlight. When we turned down the final stretch of gravel road, the new motion-activated gate opened slowly, lights blinking like welcome beacons. She looked at me and said, "We need a new hammock, one that fits 2 laptops." I laughed. "I'll build you a deck for it." The cabin was safe. The lake was quiet. And Karen, she was serving 16 months in state prison for document forgery, false reporting, and criminal trespass. The judge had been blunt at sentencing. "You attempted to weaponize bureaucracy for personal control. You failed, and now you're going to pay." The HOA was dead. The land was free. And Avery, she was just getting started.